Tell me about your vision.
Well, there's, setting a vision and a goal is always interesting because ultimately, for me, it's about setting things that are achievable. And I set off many years ago to be an entrepreneur. Matter of fact, my first entrepreneurial business was when I was 23. Uh, a great lesson. It was in and out in 8 months. It failed miserably. But that was probably one of the things that helped me shape the future and what I really wanted to accomplish in learning things that you have expectations. And when those expectations don't happen, you can get discouraged very quickly. 7 years later, I did it again. Different approach. I went off my first time into the video production industry because I loved movies and wanted to be in that. But at the end of the day, that's not really where I wanted to reside. And I learned a lot that my strength was in marketing and research and being a strategic uh, analyst in the sense of understanding markets and competition and in what drives growth within a business. And so my vision was to ultimately be in a situation where I could help companies realize their dreams and their goals and their visions by better understanding who they are, how they compete, and how they can grow. And that's really the premise of where I stand today after many iterations of working in advertising agencies, growing my own businesses, selling my own businesses, having some, missteps and failures along the way, client side, agency side, and now for the past 10 and a half years as a consultant and a fractional
Mhm.
CMO.
So, how did you get started on the marketing and starting your own company? What was that
Sure.
journey like?
Yeah. So the journey goes back right from the very beginning. When I came from New York to California, I ended up in an advertising agency. And while I certainly went to school for that, school and reality are two different things. And and so I started in a small agency, and then I went to another small agency, and then I eventually ended up in one of at the time, the 16th largest agency in the world. And where I found myself was based on the skill set I was learning as the planner. I was the strategic planner. I developed plans for clients. I did the research. And I found that I really loved that as opposed to the creative side. I jokingly say I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. And so as my journey continued, I wanted to experience the client side. Working in an agency, I always had comments about my clients. And so I wanted to see what it was like to be a client. And that added a whole new perspective. And then back and forth to another agency. And then there was a point in time where I left the agency world and I became a strategic planner, freelance strategic planner to agencies that I competed against throughout my career. And so that actually became the kind of the foundational work to really look at lots of different markets, how to work with different companies is kind of the early foundation to what I do today. Then I went back and forth between starting my own agency, growing my own agency, selling my agency, then back to client side. And then 10 and a half years ago, I recognized that I didn't like having other people in control of my life. My company that I was working for got acquired. I watched the new CEO talk about his vision. And at the end of his presentation, I realized my division was not in his vision. And so I knew that eventually they were heading off in a new direction. And so I decided I'm going to go back and take control. And I had a conscious choice. Do I become an agency again, or do I really focus on what I love? So that to getting started, it's always been there. And for me as an entrepreneur, this by the time I got to this, I'd already done it two, three, four times. And so I wasn't afraid to go out on my own, but it was really the choice of how do I focus? How do I bring a new company to market and find, what that niche might be. And, fractional CMO has really become fractional work has become very prevalent in the last couple of years, but 10 years ago it was like, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means. So we spent a lot of time explaining fractional versus interim versus outsource, those kinds of things. Um, but yeah, everything I do today has just been is was the seeds were planted years and years and years ago.
Hmm. Throughout your journey, what would you say what held you back in who you are today?
What held me back? I think in any small business it's always finance. Using the success of the business to finance the growth and trying to be smart about it. The downside of fractional work is it's going to end. It also it's time. So I only have so much time. Now I've added some people as time has gone on to help me expand the wherewithal, if you will, to provide services to clients that it isn't just me. But ultimately in the fractional world, it's just me. So again, conscious, do you start bringing on employees? If you do that, are you going to be remote? Are you going to bring on space? So those are all conscious decisions. And I think sometimes entrepreneurs get caught up in what they're doing. And, I say they're working in the business instead of on the business. And so for me over the years is making sure that I take the same advice I give my clients, and that's spending time working on the business and thinking about that future, that vision that we started with, to make sure you're constantly moving forward. Otherwise, you're like a duck on water, right? The feet are moving really fast, but you look real calm. But I would say that are kind of the two things: just the finances to grow is as we add services and do certain things, we have to have tools and those kinds of stuff.
Um, Tell me more about that. Like, what if you were to pinpoint is like one thing that you realized or that you changed that's maybe skyrocketed where you're at today, or something that was a big hurdle that you learned, some lessons that you learned, maybe some stories you'd like to share about that.
Sure. Networking. Um, Even when I had my own agency and when I worked in other agencies, I was never really responsible for new business. I was responsible for participating in winning it, but not finding it. In this situation, I'm responsible for finding it, securing it, managing it, doing the work, right? And I've never really spent time networking like I do today. I've networked more in the last 5 years than I did in, the 30 years prior. And to me, that's the key is you can never stop chasing new business because it is the lifeblood of everything you're doing because clients can come and go. You could have cycles in your business. I have a client that if they get a project today, they won't get another shot at a big project with the same company for another 3 years. That's the cycle of the products that they use before they get updated in a big way. So strategically, then what do we do in year 2 and 3 before we get to the final year? And so by understanding the dynamics, and I spent a lot of time doing strategy and research and planning, but ultimately when we get to the tactics, do I do that? Do I manage a team? How does that work? And that becomes ebb and flow, if you will. So again, I think the networking part is the thing that held me back previously. It still holds me back somewhat today but I'm probably at some networking meeting. I'll be at two of them later today because you just never know. I mean, I'm sitting in a meeting last week and a guy comes up to me who I've seen 2 dozen times. And he comes over and says, I think I have an opportunity. Now, if I hadn't been there that day and said what I said, he might not have triggered that he could be a resource. So you just never know. One of my clients was a meeting I almost blew off one day, and I decided to go at the last minute because I'm friends with the founder of this group, and sitting next to me is a guy who's now a client. But if I hadn't gone to that meeting, we never would have connected. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that holds me back today is just how do you balance the work and the networking and the new business aspect and finding that balance is hard.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.